Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our panel discussion titled Beyond the Firewall, Building a Cyber Resilient Supply Chain in a Hyper-Connected World. Our moderator is Rebecca McLaughlin Eastham, independent TV anchor and media trainer. Our panelists are Paul Sibley, Chief Information Security Officer and Deputy CIO, U.S. Department of Energy; Akshay Joshi, Head Center of Cybersecurity, World Economic Forum; Christophe Blassiau, Senior Vice President, Cybersecurity and Product Security, Global CISO and CPSO,
Please.
Schneider Electric; Michael Ruiz, VP and General Manager for Cyber Products, Honeywell. Rebecca, over to you.
Thank you very much, and hello again, everybody. It's lovely to see you again for the second half of our first day at the 2024 Global Cybersecurity Forum. I am delighted to be moderating this esteemed panel. Fantastic plethora of blue suits, gentlemen. Beautifully planned. You clearly got the memo, as did I in my blue dress. Thank you for being here today. We have an important topic to discuss. Beyond the firewall, how do we build cyber-resilient supply chains in a hyper-connected world? Because as we know, with the rapid advancement of technology and the evolvement of our businesses and our governments, we are increasingly relying on integrated technical complexities. Our supply chains are more interconnected than ever, and of course this exposes us to risks all over the world in every sector, in every government. So we're going to drill down into what those threats are and how we bolster our secure defenses against them. So without further ado, Paul, let me come to you first. How are you enjoying GCF so far?
It is fantastic. What a wonderful experience. This is my first time in Riyadh, and it's an amazing city. I think the only thing more impressive than the beauty of the city is the hospitality of our hosts. So I really appreciate the welcome and glad to be here and further the partnership between the United States and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you. We're delighted to have you here for that warm Arabic marhaba, as we say. So interesting to have you in the hot seat. So tell us, how is the US Department of Energy assessing the unique cybersecurity challenges that are facing it at this time?
I think we're all in the same boat. We were having a discussion earlier. We've been talking about cybersecurity for 20 years. I've been doing this professionally for over 20 years now. And I think if we were to honestly assess how we're doing, I think we'd have to say not well. We don't have the basic cyber hygiene principles down yet. We still struggle with multi-factor authentication. We still struggle with encryption in transit, encryption at rest, with logging, the basic cyber hygiene. And in the opening panel this morning with the distinguished panel, they talked about how do we increase that conversation and how do we drive that into the culture of what we're doing. And I think that that's really the key in how we're going to attack this from a supply chain risk management standpoint. We need to get better at the basics. We need to be able to make sure that cybersecurity is built into things. And from a supply chain risk management perspective, we need to make sure that cybersecurity is built in, not bolted on after the fact, if we're going to have a secure infrastructure. So I would say the assessment is that we've got a lot of work to do, and we can do a lot better. Now, the bright spot of that, Rebecca, is that I think the fact that we're here, we're in a group that's committed to doing this and committed to advancing this. I think anytime, and that's why I'm very appreciative to be here, where we can get a group of distinguished professionals in a room to start talking about this, that furthers the conversation. It doesn't solve it, but it furthers the conversation. And I think we, as cyber professionals, need to figure out how we change our message. How do we get the message out? Because I don't know how many of you have children, but I know I have 2 daughters, and they ignore everything about cybersecurity. So I'm not doing a good job even in my own home. So how do we do a better job of communicating this, internationally?
Mm-hmm. Just a quick show of hands. How many people's children ignore every rule about cybersecurity? Quite a few, unsurprisingly, yes. Let me come to you, Akshay. When it comes to the World Economic Forum, do you echo what you've heard from Paul? Are we not doing well?
You know, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's the second time, and it's fantastic as always. I completely echo what Paul says. In fact, you know, I think John started the meeting this morning saying that cyber risk continues to feature very prominently on our global risks report. I also want to allude to a term that we put out early part of this year called cyber inequity. So our global cybersecurity outlook report unveiled that over the past 2 or 3 years that we've been measuring it, right, we ask organizations to self-report on how they perceive themselves to be cyber resilient. We always used to have a very healthy share that was saying that they were adhering to minimum viable resilience until about 2022. Now that has shrunk substantially this year. And now if you're looking at the notion of cyber inequity, we're applying 3 lenses. The first is obviously the large organizations versus the small organizations. The second is the national lens. There are certain countries that are more cyber mature, and by extension, there are regulations in place that also mandate that the baseline needs to be better. But then there is the global south that we need to bring along as well. And lastly, if we look at industries, there is a pretty significant variance. There are the mature sectors like financial services that have been very, very advanced, but then there are also uncharted territories where cyber is extremely critical, but at the same time, you know, I think not enough attention has been given. I provide this context to say that, you know, in cyberspace, as we conduct operations, we work with actors that are spread across all of these 3 layers. Cyberspace sees no boundaries, and therefore, the more we are able to build the resilience within an ecosystem, that's only when we can be secure.
Thank you very much. Christophe, let me come to you. Speak to us from Schneider Electric's point of view.
Yeah, very good, and thanks for having me. So this is the 4th time at the GCF, and I'm very happy and honored to be invited still. So what do we see as a mega trend in the energy sector? So first, we have a major decentralization happening. Second, decarbonation is everywhere in the agenda of any companies, and digitization of the sector is very high in also everybody's agenda. And this is for efficiency. This is for sustainability agenda. This is for remote connection, remote connectivity. And this brings, with this move to the cloud, IoT, automation, AI, it brings an hyperconnectivity world of environment that was supposed to be isolated before. And guess what? This hyperconnectivity is bringing a bigger attack surface, bigger dependencies on tech providers. And here, attackers are also adapting their tactics now, targeting the cloud, targeting accounts in the cloud. But yet, we see still ransomware attack, so to speak, basic ransomware attacks still making their way to operational environment and disrupting operation and critical infrastructure. So because of a lack of attention on operation, because of a lack, Paul, you said it, cyber hygiene, on even password and access management, or lack of basic segmentation. So here there is a kind of a wake-up call for technology providers and also operators to bring back this attention to secure operation at scale. And here, need also to have clear responsibility in this hyper-connected world between asset owner and tech providers so that we scale secure by operation as an attention.
Thank you very much. Michael, let me come to you. On behalf of Honeywell, talk to us about the current state of play, but also what new technologies could be leveraged to make us more resilient.
Well, thank you for having me. This is my second year here, and this is always a great forum to be part of. When we at Honeywell think about cybersecurity, we think of it kind of in 3 key trend areas. First is around IT and OT convergence. If we want to understand kind of the total cybersecurity footprint of an organization from a supply chain or otherwise, we need to understand it from both sides of that equation. Secondly, we look at it from the perspective of governance and regulatory regimes across the globe. and the complexity that creates and potential threats and issues that might create in the world. And then lastly, we look at it from the perspective of emerging technology, specifically around artificial intelligence, and how artificial intelligence is that double-edged sword of both having escalated the game for the attackers and for the defenders. But to Paul's point earlier, about 15, 20 years ago, we started the journey on the cybersecurity from an IT perspective, and I think we've made some good strides there, although we still have a long way to go. I would argue that today OT cybersecurity is probably where IT cybersecurity was, 15 years ago, and we have a long chasm to cross there in order to get to a place where we can truly converge and have a complete picture of cybersecurity.
What's on the horizon? What gives you hope that things will improve in the near term at least?
Yeah, well, look, I think from an IT-OT convergence space, I see companies working together to build end-to-end solutions that really solve our clients' needs. It's an area that we are very much focused on from a Honeywell perspective, is to really look at the problem holistically, end-to-end, and providing, really partnering with our clients from an outcomes-based perspective. So I'm very hopeful from that perspective. I think that AI is this amazing opportunity in the world right now, where we're really going to create this force multiplier that's going to really fundamentally change the way we think about, just about everything, but specifically around cybersecurity. I think the way that we will deploy the workforce, enable the workforce in order to be able to work at scale and through a very complex space. I think there's a lot of hope there.
I'm going to come to all the panelists, because let's pick up on partnership and doing things better together, and in particular, the climate for it in 2025 and beyond, but also where investment is coming from. Michael, I'll come to you, and then Paul, we'll go back this way.
On partnerships?
Yes.
Yeah, look, I think that we have to think about what each part of the partnership equation brings. Governments have a very specific role to play here. They're working for the greater good. Academic organizations have the mechanism to be able to think about technologies that are not necessarily ready to commercialize. Businesses have both the money and the mechanisms in order to bring it all together. That three-legged stool of government, academia, and industry working together in order to be able to do what's good for our global society is crucial. Forums like this are important for us to be able to bring all of that together in one mechanism to be able to really change the way that we push forward.
Paul, we know it's crucial. Is it happening fast enough from the DOE's point of view? How are you leveraging partnerships to help bolster resilience for the supply chain?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Rebecca. Here's the reality. The problems we're facing can't be solved by any one group, right? It can't be solved by government. It can't be solved by academia. It can't be solved by industry. We have to work together to solve this problem. And we have to figure out how to work together. Just to scope the problem, the cost of attacks through supply chain risk management, or as a result of not having supply chain risk management, was $46 billion in 2023. We expect that to be $60 billion in 2025. By 2031, we expect that to be about $138 billion. There was last year 245,000 malware instances in open source software. That's more than double the previous 4 years. Things are happening much quicker. Our adversaries are much faster than we're reacting to. So we have to tackle this problem together. Now, what gives me hope? This gives me hope. That we're all here, we're all talking about it. The first step in correcting any problem is recognizing the problem. We heard our distinguished panel this morning. All three of them had a common theme. We need to find countries, companies, institutions of like-minded people that are interested in solving this problem, because this is not a Saudi problem. This is not a United States problem. This is not an industry problem or a European problem. This is an international problem. And the only way we're going to solve this is through cooperation and partnerships and working together. The DOE is uniquely positioned we have 17 national laboratories that partner with industry, that we partner with academia. I was talking to somebody earlier today about our partnership with Stanford University and the linear accelerator that we have there. So we are positioned to further these partnerships, and I'm here to further this partnership, and that's what gives me hope, Rebecca, is that we're here.
And we're delighted that you are. Thank you. More food for thought and hope. Let me come to you when it comes to the World Economic Forum. What would you say, Akshay, is the trend that we see emerging, not least just for multilateral ties, but multi-stakeholder collaboration?
You know, when you asked Michael the question about hope, I was hoping that you would ask me that question as well, because multi-stakeholder collaboration, public-private partnerships towards solving some of the issues that are most pertinent in resilience is what really gives me hope. And we have some really great examples, and I'm really delighted to be sitting next to Christophe, who's been one of the biggest champions of the resilience work that we've been doing. Let me just pick on the example of our work with the electricity sector. Way back in 2019, we had a chat with several CEOs from the electricity sector. The framing was very simple. Cyberspace is presenting a lot of threats to the industry, and we need to have concerted action on this issue. This really gave us the mandate to then bring folks from the utilities as well as the technology providers. Christophe was part of that group, continues to be till this day. Collectively, there's a lot that has been achieved. In a first instance, we started looking at some of the culture-related issues, went on to look at some of the regulatory fragmentation, and eventually went on to look at good practices to talk about third-party risk management. As an extension, the community became so strong that when the NIS 2.0 directive was being launched within the European Commission, for consultations, this community was called upon and provided inputs into the package. So it's really an example of, I think building a community, starting to work together, addressing some of the issues on which there can be alignment, and then going on to challenge the really, really tough issues that we find difficult to crack, and then eventually taking all of these learnings and seeing how they can translate into packages that can really help organizations across the world.
Thank you very much. Christophe, we naturally come to you next.
Of course, and thanks, Akshay, because we spent the last 2 days together with the oil and gas community, with the World Economic Forum, to try to shape the future, but also to tackle the ongoing problems that we have. So, of course, partnership is key, and Paul, you said it. There is nothing we can do alone, or you can do alone. So there is an imperative for this partnership. So we should question ourselves anytime from a cyber professional. So where do we connect the dots so that we can speak about resilience on the end-to-end on the value chain there. And I like to call out some illustration of partnerships. So with NCA on the skill framework, on the OT cyber compliance framework. With DOE as an example, because they are doing a lot in the US, but also across the industry on technology validation. So with their national labs, with a very unique program called Citrix. And lately, I think it was in June, was the first one to publish a supply chain security principle, articulating also some friction point between the technology provider and the end user. And this is really a key topic for us to do this partnership. And so back to your point, so the World Economic Forum is also a great platform, like the GCF, to collaborate across industry with peers, because there is no competition in cybersecurity, with our customer, with our operators. And I'm happy to say that we have launched a very horizontal initiative in the last 18 months. I was speaking about operation, and in critical operation, we have exposure. We have doors open, just waiting for being attacked. And we try to chase this external vulnerability or exposure of environment with some scanning partners and with authorities to make sure that we identify things or doors that are open in critical infrastructure so that we can reach out for free, by the way, before something bad happens. So this is the kind of horizontal partnership that we are looking for. And it's easy to do partnership here because we have an imperative to succeed.
Easy to do partnership. What about the ease of regulation? Do we need some kind of harmonization internationally? Let me come to the government first. Paul, what would you say in terms of supply chains, reinforcing their robustness? Do we need to have something more standardized, more international, more harmonized?
I think that that would ultimately be the right answer. That it's a
Big ask.
it's a long way away. But I think when we look at the supply chain, the only way to get to where we need to be is if, again, through the partnership. If we try to tackle this individually, I don't think even the United States government is a huge consumer of IT and OT. But even with our purchasing power, we don't have the ability to move the needle individually. The vendors will develop products specifically for us and then charge us a tremendous amount of money for those products. That doesn't help the partnership, it doesn't help the global community. What we need to do is to have those international standards, international regulations, harmonize those, so we have one set of standards and one regulations. I mean, that would be a beautiful thing. And then lift all of the international communities by having the same standards and the vendors having to adhere to those standards. We were having this discussion earlier with the partners from Aramco about this very issue. So I think that is ultimately where we need to be. I think it's a while before we get there, but that is, I think, ultimately the way this is going to work, and we have to increase the partnerships. An example of how this works really well is the Department of Defense in the United States has an organization called DISA, the Defense Information Systems Agency. They have an organization called JITC, which is the Joint Interoperability Test Center. And whenever a vendor wants to sell a product or software into that network, they have to bring the equipment to the lab, and it gets tested through a series of tests to make sure that it adheres to the requirements. That would be beautiful if we had that on the international stage, where we could all ensure that when we buy a piece of software or a piece of hardware from a vendor, that it's gone through a testing process and has been validated. And I think that that's ultimately where we want to be. Now, how we get there is beyond my abilities and scope, but I think that that's a model for how we get there and how we work.
One step at a time, so they say. Let me come to you, Akshay, with regards to regulation. You don't want to unbalance things. You want to still foster innovation and entrepreneurship and the SMEs and the innovators coming into this space. You also don't want to suppress economic growth. How do you strike that balance? And what about something across the board, ultimately? How do we move in that direction, harmonization?
You know, it's an interesting point you raise, and maybe an initial instinct would be that regulation is not a good thing and it stifles innovation. However, when we surveyed people as part of our global cybersecurity outlook, over 60% of them believe vehemently that regulations have a very positive impact on cybersecurity overall for their organizations. So I just start with the suggestion that regulation is not necessarily a bad thing. At the same time, you know, I think the burgeoning regulations across different geographies do indeed put a lot of burden on organizations, and therefore, you know, I think there definitely needs to be a move towards harmonization. It's easier said than done, but there are lots of steps that are being taken in the right direction. So recently, we responded to a request for information from the Office of the National Cyber Director, which was squarely around, you know, regulatory harmonization. So the steps are there. Over the past year, we've seen various guidances being put out that have been put out together with a number of government partners, and that is a step in the right direction. Of course, it takes time to move regulation. Over the past 2 days, Christophe was mentioning, we were together, and with industry, with representatives from cybersecurity authorities and others, there was a conscious discussion that if you look at the supply chain as a whole, each organization is actually doing a vetting of their supply chain partners as they're bringing them in. Now, can we at a bare minimum start to accept, are we comfortable if an X player has already vetted a particular entity, and does this become the baseline as opposed to us starting off from scratch? So there are ways to collaborate, even in the absence of regulation, that can really provide us with a lot of efficiencies.
Christophe.
Of course, regulation is great, fragmentation is a pain. Okay, so let's put it that way. And of course, every nation has the right and the duty to protect its citizens and critical infrastructure, and so authorities are shaping their national security agenda and their set of regulation, rightfully so. Now, think about it. As a global company, we are operating in 100 plus countries, and we are having incident reporting obligations that are very different from one country to another. And guess what? There is no border for cybersecurity incidents. So that's interesting. And to your point, we receive thousands of customer questionnaires that are all different because everybody is inventing its own standard. So, of course, we embrace regulation because this is a step up for the whole industry, and there is a lot of good things happening with more requests for information and more collaboration upstream of the regulation, which is also a sign that we are in the right path. In terms of abstracting this fragmentation, we need to adopt and align or adhere to standards. So that's why we push from an industry standpoint a lot on IEC 62443, on ISO 27K. And here, I believe also cyber is getting more formal. We wanted to have more evidence that we are doing the right thing, the minimum thing, and we are not negligent on what we are doing. And we see good move from the EU on NIS2, and also on Cyber Resilience Act, which is coming with a set of expectations on any digital technologies and smart products that really will reshape some industry standards in cybersecurity, which is good.
Thank you. The last word to you, Michael, please.
I might offer maybe a slightly different view, which is that when we think about harmonization, what are we trying to do? Often we find ourselves that we're kind of oscillating between centralization and decentralization. Thinking of international standards as centralization, all of us agreeing on a set pattern on how we're going to do things. Decentralization being things like data sovereignty laws and local and regional laws that are being put in place because of a response to the levels of attacks that we're seeing. As a global community, we're going to oscillate between the centralized and decentralized space until we find that sweet spot, that harmonized sweet spot between a set of policies that we can all agree on as a global society and a set of decentralization rules that we're going to need for local, regional advancement. And I think we're seeing that happening right in front of us today, whether it's the IEC 62443 standards that we're all kind of aligning to, or whether we look at things like OTCC here in the Kingdom, we're seeing both those centralization and decentralization components harmonizing.
Thank you very much. Finally, Paul, let me come to you. Your first time here at GCF. Let me ask you, what are you hoping to take back with you to the States and the Department of Energy?
What I will take back to my team back in the States is that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the people at the GCF, have the same concerns we do. And that we have a group of like-minded people here that understand the problems that we're facing, understand what the solutions are, and that to me is very encouraging. I will take back the message of hope that you mentioned earlier, that we've got big problems, and none of us are denying that. But I think together we can solve these problems. And I think that when we look at cooperation, and I agree with you. I mean, I think standardization might be the answer rather than regulation, and how we can solve this. But the fact is we're going to solve this together. I really appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate your graciousness. But most of all, I appreciate every one of us sitting in the room trying to figure out how we solve this problem, because it's a big problem to solve.
Standardization, the word of the panel. Thank you all for being here, for sharing your invaluable insights. We really appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking my fabulous blue-suited panel.